A lot of engineers are getting really excited about that bleeding edge. And I even ran into an old friend yesterday who was in crypto, went back to the Web 2 side, and he was complaining that it's hard for him to keep engineers now because they all want to come over to the dark side of crypto.
Hi there, and welcome to the Parachain Auctions Podcast hosted by Kraken. I'm Brian Hoffman, Crypto Platform Product Lead, and I'm glad you could join me out here on the cutting edge of crypto technologies. On this show, you'll hear from the leaders and innovators in Parachains from around the world. Tune in for insights from the best and brightest about their new projects. Whether this is the first you've heard of Parachains or you're a DeFi aficionado, come with us behind the scenes as we explore the technology of the future today. Today, we are very lucky to have with us Cassidy Daly, who is a token engineer for Centrifuge and is also working on Altair. Welcome to the show, Cassidy.
Hi, Brian. Thanks for having me.
So this is really great to have you on. I think it's this project and team is really fascinating. I think one of the biggest challenges for blockchain, I think, is figuring out a way to tie real world objects, businesses, concepts into blockchain, because everybody knows that digital assets are just natively on the blockchain. It's pretty easy to do. But what you guys are doing is really helping people take advantage of all of the things going on in the real world and bringing it to Substrate, Kusama, Polkadot, all the above. So I would love to get to know you first, though, before we get into that. Maybe you could give us a little bit of a background of how you got involved with Centrifuge and, how this all got started.
Yeah, for sure. As you said, I work at Centrifuge now, and we're the team behind Altair. That's our Kusama parachain. Before working on Centrifuge, I was actually focusing on economics. I studied international finance, even consulted for the Fed for a brief second there, and really found that what I wanted to do was sort of reimagine what these systems look like. And the best place to do that right now is in the crypto space. So I actually moved to Berlin, tried to start my own project here, and that didn't end up working out. But through that process, I met Centrifuge and really fell in love with the idea of bringing real world assets into DeFi. So that's sort of how I came into Centrifuge. And I think for me, it's this passion really comes from the ability to sort of reimagine um, in the beginning what supply chain finance looked like, but now it's really what traditional finance as a whole can look like, and banking in particular with Centrifuge.
Yeah, it's funny you brought up supply chain financing. I was watching one of the videos that you guys had on YouTube, and it was saying the least sexy part of the business world is supply chain finance. But it's funny, over the years I've run into so many people at conferences trying to kind of reinvent supply chain finance or like having projects touching in that space, and I haven't really seen anything come out except for what you guys are doing is seems to be working and growing. So we threw out a bunch of different things at the beginning of the podcast: Altair, Centrifuge, like Kusama, Parachains, all these things, right? Like, so maybe you could help us understand what's the difference between Centrifuge and Altair.
Yeah. So today, Centrifuge is what exists. Centrifuge has its own substrate-based chain, Centrifuge chain. It's standalone, so it has its own set of validators, and it connects to our financing dApp, TinLake. TinLake is the dApp to pool different assets together to allow them to get access to financing. And that dApp today lives on Ethereum and has over $30 million worth of total value locked. That chain will transition to becoming a parachain on Polkadot to basically access all of the cool features that Polkadot can enable, which specifically for us, right now we run our own bridge. It's tedious, it takes a lot of time from our team, and it's probably not as secure as the one on Polkadot will be. So for us, becoming a parachain connecting to Polkadot is going to give us a lot more potential and possibilities than having our DApp exist on Ethereum today. And where Altair comes in is as a Kusama parachain. And I think, like many in this ecosystem, was a little bit skeptical of Kusama at first. Wasn't really sure how much value a sort of test net, but with real value could have. And it's proven to be extremely important, actually. I think for us, it was watching Parity use Kusama as a way to test out things before they launched Polkadot itself. And for us, it's actually going to be hugely important to get Altair up and running first, work out any sort of kinks that, of course, we could find some in our test nets that don't have value, but it's actually a really interesting. I don't know if breakthrough is maybe too much of a word, or maybe it is the right word. Having a test net with real value, I think, is going to be something that we're really interested in pushing. Basically, the boundaries of what asset financing can look like using Altair.
Yeah, I like the fact that you guys are using the Canary Net network and then the mainnet network kind of as they are intended to be. There's a lot of teams that are, they're going to live on one or the other, or they're the same on each one. But you guys, at least from what I've read, it sounds like you guys are using the Canary chain as like a real test bed for like new features and a way for people to see experimental options, function before they go live on the main network. um, it gives people like a reason to have Altair and um, Centrifuge, to be on both networks and participate there, which is really cool. So we kind of just glossed over it, but like maybe you could give us like a short synopsis of like what you guys are actually trying to accomplish here, because I know it involves some like very interesting topics like NFTs and bridges and all this stuff that people are really excited about. So maybe you could just give like a quick synopsis of like what you guys are trying to solve.
Yeah. Um, so I guess I could start with Centrifuge. Right now, Centrifuge exists and it is giving businesses access to financing for all sorts of assets. So this DApp Tin Lake that I mentioned, how it works is that we pool different sorts of assets in this Tin Lake DApp on Ethereum. And by we, I actually mean what we call asset originators. So those are actually their own companies, and they have the interface with users, whether it is sellers on Amazon or artists on Spotify or someone who owns a house in the northeast of the US. These are the users that are connecting to the asset originators. Those asset originators pool these assets on chain on Tin Lake, and they mint NFTs for each individual asset in order to pull them together. And on the other side, investors can provide liquidity for these assets right now in the form of DAI or a Cello dollar. And hopefully in the future, things like a Kala dollar or a Kura dollar or even more stable coins. Um, and for me, the really cool thing about Altair is taking that one step further. So with Centrifuge Chain, we're really focused on lots of different types of assets, real world assets in particular, and more stable assets. Your traditional sort of things like mortgages or inventory or invoices. And with Altair, I think the really cool thing, the opportunity that we have there is really experimenting with the types of assets that we can finance. So to give like a more concrete example, one of the ideas that we're sort of bouncing around with some of these NFT owners is liquidity for CryptoPunks. So Altair will be flexible enough that it can enable this sort of asset financing for a super wide range of different types of assets, even crypto native assets like CryptoPunks. And so one could imagine maybe like a CryptoPunk DAO on chain that's pooling different assets. And on the other side, investors could finance this pool on Kusama with something like Karura Dollar. So that's, I think, one of the first use cases that we're really excited about with Altair that could come to life pretty soon. So that's something that I think is really pushing the boundaries. There's probably a lot of kinks to work out along the way, but that's why I find it so exciting.
Yeah, that's I saw that example and it would like had my head spinning because I've already been thinking a lot about this and different more advanced NFT concepts like fractionalization and things like that. But the one that I was thinking is like, well, how do we, allow people to kind of pool these NFT assets and use them as collateral or take loans against it? Ultimately the big question there is like, well, how do you price these things? I'd be like, I mean, what they're gifts, 2 weeks ago, some of them were only worth like $400 and now they're worth six figures, which is crazy. But being able to somehow unlock that liquidity would be huge for some of these people. I mean, it's like life changing in some instances. So I think that's really really exciting. And so that is something that you are going to be probably exploring on Altair first.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be something that we'll explore on Altair, keeping that sort of experimental focus for that network.
Very cool. So this team has been around for a couple years now, right? How like you've been working on it for a long time, and only just now have the Parachains started to kind of go live on Kusama, not even Polkadot. I mean,
Yeah.
how did the thinking evolve, like from just a substrate chain, and then like were you always intending to have a Parachain, or like how did the evolution of that thinking occur?
Yeah. So, I mean, Tin Lake's live on Ethereum. That was the original thought was, here's Ethereum, we can build Tin Lake. Let's get this going. And very quickly it became clear that ETH 2.0 was nowhere in sight. Still very much like long term, if ever, going to come around. So we needed a solution for scalability. And at the time, this was 2 years ago, it was really parity substrate, and maybe there were a couple of others that were potential alternative options like the Cosmos SDK. But for us, parity had so much support behind teams that wanted to use substrate. They were running builders programs. They had whole teams of people available to answer questions, to support us building with substrate. So it was kind of a no brainer to go that route. And we didn't want to wait for Parachains to launch. So we went ahead and just launched Centrifuge Chain as a standalone chain. It was a bit of effort to ramp up all these validators, get them interested and excited about Centrifuge Chain and the long term vision there. And I can definitely see why. Going the parachain route is definitely going to be much easier for teams, not needing to go through that whole work of building up a validator set and the security yourselves. So for us, it was kind of always on the horizon that we'd be interested in the parachain. Also, from a security standpoint, it is a lot of work to get enough value staked on your own chain. Um, and we're working with, financing hopefully very soon, hundreds of millions worth of assets, potentially in the billions at some point in the near future. And it really matters how much value you have staked on chain, how much security guarantees you have. And so for us, becoming a parachain, having the Polkadot relay chain provide that security is super important. I think another one of the elements there is just keeping up with development um, with things like bridges. So the bridges to Ethereum or to Celo or whichever chain that we might be wanting to work with in the future. Um, the security of those are also super important, and that's something that for teams like us, when we have a very specific use case that we're already devoting so much time to realizing that vision, thinking about all these other, chain specific things takes a lot of time away from the team that we could otherwise be using to focus on asset financing. So I think that's why we're super excited for the future of parachains and being able to sort of outsource, thinking about the chain, the blockchain itself to Parity and other teams, and us being able to focus on that use case.
Yeah, that's just a common sentiment it seems across all the projects building parachains is like the relief of not having to build and grow that like core security of the blockchain. Like building a community is hard, and then when you have kind of like a more like I wouldn't say esoteric, but like, a complex use case. It's like going to parties. Hey, you want to talk about supply chain finance, guys? Like on the blockchain? It's like it's a challenging topic. So Tin Lake is the DApp on this. It sounds like a code name for like a new CPU. Like, how did you how did you guys come up with the name for that?
Um, I guess you'd probably have to ask like Lucas and Martin would probably have a better explanation. I think it was some sort of a play on Silver Lake. That's like a place in LA, but I mean that's probably a bad answer. I don't remember
Which is
exactly.
also, I think, a CPU name. So, like, I guess I'm on the right track. Yeah, that's interesting. I always ask people the names because not every project has a Vitalik to just dream up new names. But yeah. So Tin Lake. You said it's built on Ethereum currently. Is like, will there be a new Tin Lake or some other DApp, or like, will it just migrate to the Parachain when you get it, or like, how will that work?
Yeah, right now that's our next big push is migrating Tin Lake over to Centrifuge chain. So that's actually where Altair will be super important for us, is that it'll migrate over to Altair first, and we'll be able to test out a lot of the kinks of, what's entailed with moving a Solidity based app over to something built in Rust on Substrate. So taking in name suggestions for what Tin Lake on Altair should be called.
Yeah.
I have a teammate who's been throwing out some names there, like Copper Pond has been one of the sillier ones. But I think it'll be super important actually. Like that's a really good example of why Altair is going to be great for us is when we move Tin Lake over to Altair, we'll be able to work out a lot of things there first and have real value at stake to find like more bugs and more issues than we would on a regular test net before we move it over to Centrifuge chain, where then hundreds of millions of dollars will be at stake.
Yeah, definitely. So I have a question around. So let's say I have a bundle of mortgages that I want to onboard to this network. Like, I mean, what's the process there for somebody who is holding like real world assets and wants to like get this onto Altair or get this onto Centrifuge? What's the process like?
With Centrifuge, it's a little bit less like individual user focused. So as I mentioned before, we have what we call asset originators, and these are businesses, and the businesses are user facing. So they have users that have mortgages or
Hmm.
are sellers on Amazon or artists on Spotify, and those businesses are experts in that asset class. And at the moment, they are assessing the value of these assets, the risk of these assets, providing all of that information, and spinning up these pools on Tinlake. The next really big push that I'm going to be focusing most of my time on the rest of this year into next year is our underwriter token design. And that's really to decentralize this risk assessment process so that it's not relying on this one business bringing these assets on chain, but really opening up this access of risk assessment to lots of different types of underwriters with different types of expertise, and being able to get ideally a more accurate and fair interest rate to be charged for every different type of asset that's going to be on Tinlake.
Very cool. So let's talk a little bit about Altair specifically. So contributors to the Altair crowd loan will eventually get air tokens. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
So the air token is going to be sort of a governance token used for gas. I think that's a pretty straightforward approach that a lot of the teams are taking. But right now with um, sorry, with Tin Lake. Now we've been talking about lakes and ponds and everything. I'm like trying to remember all the code names here. Tin Lake has sort of two tokens involved with it already, right? It has tin and drop, and
Hmm.
this is going to, this is where it gets complicated and probably beyond the small amount of time we have to talk about this, where it breaks down into tranches and like prioritization of how people get paid and all this stuff. But so will there be two additional tokens on top of Tin Lake when it's moved to the Parachain, or like how will it function very similar?
Yeah, so these are very different type of tokens from the air token. So the air token is the token that's native to the Altair chain. As you said, it's used for transaction fees, it's used for governance, will probably be used within the Tin Lake DApp in a different way going forward. But Tin and Drop represent specifically the senior and junior tranche of for investors that are providing liquidity to different asset pools. So right now it exists as an ERC20 token. So it'll be, basically the substrate equivalent of what that looks like. And it's really, it's basically just representing your share of investment in a pool. And this is the innovation of blockchain, is that it enables a lot more use cases with having a token representation of your senior share in a pool, that you could actually just sell that directly to another investor instead of needing to always liquidate your position, for example. And these are security tokens because these are like securitization pools. So that would only be possible on like a securities exchange platform, for example. But it does, enable a lot more, hopefully, like more efficiency also in the system because these positions are represented by tokens. It makes a lot of different things involved in traditional finance way easier because we make it, on chain with tokens.
Yeah, that's definitely really interesting. Um, so let's talk a little bit about the Parachain auctions themselves. I mean, this is the Parachain Auctions podcast, so it makes sense we would talk a little bit about that. Um, I guess the second batch of auctions goes out tomorrow, I believe, or maybe Wednesday. I can't remember.
Wednesday.
I'm losing Wednesday. All right, the first. I know it's the first.
Yeah.
And you guys are going to be going up for that against a couple really big teams. We spoke with like Kilt last week. It was just like a really big project out there. What's your guys' strategy for trying to win auction? What's the plan?
I mean, we're really trying to put as much information out there for the community about how exciting we think Altair is. For example, joining podcasts like yours, and just, getting people as excited as we are about what we think the potential of Altair is. We also are rewarding crowd loan participants with air tokens. So we are rewarding 400 air tokens per 1 KSM that's contributed to the crowd loan. And we have 18% of the total supply of air tokens reserved for crowd loan participants. And we chose a much larger number this time around, really to get air tokens into the hands of KSM holders and get a lot of overlap between the Kusama ecosystem and the Altair ecosystem. So we think that's going to be super important to get the Kusama community really involved in Altair and what we're doing. So that's sort of like the baseline. And then to get people really excited from the beginning, we added this early bird bonus of 10%. And then this time around, we also added a referral bonus. So 5% for both the person that's referring and the referred person. So you and a friend can get both an extra 5%. And then we're going to be announcing an extra special bonus soon for those that contribute more than 10 KSM. So I'm kind of excited about that. So keep your eyes peeled. Um, but yeah, basically just focusing on the ownership that crowd loan participants can get of the Altair network as why I think this is super interesting for people to participate in. And that said, we also have a ton of respect for the other teams that are participating. So not really seeing it as like 100% of a competition because, you mentioned Kilt. We also are really excited about their project and want them to get a slot. Because I think one of the biggest breakthroughs of parachains is going to be the interoperability between different parachain projects. I think for me, like I'm super excited that it's going to make it way easier to collaborate with teams like Kilt, like Akala, like Moonbeam on different use cases between the different projects. So super excited about that as well.
Yeah, I think it's I remember going through the ICO craze, and all the teams kind of just seemed to be scrambling, running off and doing their own direction. But like the Kusama Parachain auctions have really, I think, allowed the teams to focus on like how do they interoperate, how do we take advantage of each other's capabilities, and I can definitely see where like most of the teams overlap in certain areas. I mean, especially with you guys having like, this deep Ethereum background, and it's just there's no way to like be in a silo. Like Ethereum affects like everything going on right now, and so the influence is just amazing. But so the Parachain auctions are going to be launching this week. You guys are going to be going for it. There's 5 slots now, and then Polkadot's going to be coming up right behind that. Are you guys prepared for that as well?
I mean, super nervous, but also looking forward to it. I think we've been building up for Polkadot Parachain auctions for a while now. So fingers crossed that those go well too. But yeah, really looking forward for those to get started as well.
Let's talk a little bit about your community. You guys, like I mentioned earlier, you guys have been around for a little while. You're not like just brand new kids on the block or anything. How do you keep your community engaged, excited, growing constantly through all of this? I mean, I'm sure they're excited about the auctions, but prior to that, how did you guys find building up the community of supporters?
It's been a fair amount of work, and not only from us, but from like people in our community as well. And I think for me, that's actually been key for the growth of our community is getting our own community members really excited and themselves being able to participate and sort of like spread the word and spread information um, and help and support for Centrifuge and how to use it and how to get involved. So we have an ambassadors program, for example, and our ambassadors are really amazing, honestly. They just jump in and support wherever they can. So from like questions that get asked on our Telegram channel to like our governance forum, being able to step in and explain different things like for example, we have liquidity rewards for our Tin Lake DApp, and those get voted on by governance of our Centrifuge token holders. And every time that there's a governance decision, it does take a little bit of an explanation to understand why certain decisions are being proposed and what these rewards should look like. And it's been such a huge support for us to have the ambassadors involved and also giving their opinions, and it just encourages a lot more conversation and good questions and ultimately better understanding of the project as a whole for a whole community. So I think I would say our ambassadors have been a huge key in keeping our community together. Also running different programs like Discord missions, just something fun to get people involved
Mhm.
and get some swag as a reward, or an NFT meme competition, different things like that that just gets like people excited and interested in just being a part of the community.
Yeah, that's really cool. So it sounds like you guys got a lot going on with Tin Lake and all of the excitement around the auctions. But like, what have you found to be the most challenging thing about building all of this out as you come closer to the parachains? I mean, it sounds like you guys have got it all nailed down on the Ethereum side. But like, and you spoke a little bit about like the challenges of like Ethereum 2.0 and it not coming, but like, what has been the hardest part about bringing all of this project over to like the Polkadot ecosystem?
Well, I think I've used the word exciting a lot in this podcast. But the flip side of that word is, we're on the bleeding edge. And yeah, it's exciting a lot of the times. It's also a lot of work to be on the bleeding edge because that means things break a lot. And specifically with the Parachain auctions, we're relying on Parity developing substrate, getting things out on Kusama governance, and then Polkadot governance. And these are all really new elements that we have to deal with. And every time Parity makes an upgrade to Substrate, we've got to be right behind them making those upgrades too.
Yeah.
And just keeping up with their amazing pace of development, by the way, I mean, it's hard. It's really hard for teams like us that even have a lot of experienced engineers, but imagine an even smaller team, they've got a lot more up against them. So I imagine it's got to be hard for every project, just being on the bleeding edge here, not really knowing what's coming next or when. Maybe there's going to be some sort of bug that comes up. I know in the last batch, the projects faced
Yeah.
that. I think Moonbeam did with their like governance upgrade. Um, so I think that's the biggest challenge for these projects. For us and for everyone else is just keeping up with what that bleeding edge is, and sort of dealing with the punches whenever they sort of come from being at the edge there. So it is exciting, but it is a lot of work sometimes.
Yeah, a lot of the projects have kind of mentioned, it's like there is some air of like you get it when you get it from parody and Web3. It's like it just happens, and then everybody kind of scrambles and deals with it. But I mean, I guess it adds a little bit of excitement to the whole thing. But I'm sure for teams like that's for us on the outside looking in. For the teams like you guys are probably just like, why is this happening? And we have to go and like deal with it. But yeah, it's as an engineer, I'm sure that's like part of the excitement though of like building all of this. You don't know where it's going.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
yeah, so you mentioned that some of the other teams are kind of smaller. Well, how big is Centrifuge? How big is the team?
We're about 30 people now. So not tiny, but not huge either. But we're growing pretty fast. And so we'll probably get up to something around 40 or 50 quite soon, I'd imagine.
So are you finding a lot of people like inbound interest to like join the project and get involved?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think I think like you just said, a lot of engineers are getting really excited about that bleeding edge. And I even ran into an old friend yesterday who was in crypto, went back to the Web 2 side, and he was complaining that it's hard for him to keep engineers now because they all want to come over to the dark side of crypto. And that's kind of a new thing. I think it used to be a bit hard to find engineers that were really excited and being on that bleeding edge. And now it's becoming easier and easier. I think people are really getting interested in what they can do and what the potential is of this new tech.
Yeah, I think I was talking to someone the other day. I was saying, you know, Polkadot and Kusama, like at Kraken, we've like really made a big commitment and investment of time and money and resources to like really build out stuff for this ecosystem because we really believe in where it's going. But it does still seem very like underappreciated in a lot of ways. I don't think people really realize the like what can happen with this whole ecosystem. I mean, it really is like there's some really amazing projects and teams building out, and I think that you guys are going to definitely attract more talent as time goes on for sure. What kind of like roles and positions are you looking to fill? Like, what kind of needs for people that are listening to the podcast that might be interested in joining a project like yours?
I'd say we're always looking for good engineers for sure. So whether you're a full stack engineer or specialized in Rust, working with Substrate, we could definitely use more help there all the time. But we're also looking for all sorts of different positions like marketing pros or someone who's really good at biz dev. So I think for us, we're in the stage as a project of, if you're talented at what you do, then you should reach out and we'd love to talk to you.
And you guys are all located around the world or like in one location? Doesn't matter.
Yeah, we actually used to be mostly Berlin based. A couple years ago, we have an office here still. I'm in Berlin at the moment, but I think I mean, for better or worse, the pandemic really pushed us in the opposite direction of just becoming remote first and sort of spread all over now, which has actually been really great for the team.
Awesome. So one of our favorite things to do on the podcast is we always ask the teams to give us what we call a chaos score. So the slogan for Kusama is expect chaos. We all know that. But how chaotic has this whole process been leading up to the Parachain auctions? 1 to 10, what chaos score do you give it?
I would give it an 8. It's been pretty chaotic. Um, I would say we actually did a token sale earlier this year. If that was the 10, then this is an 8.
Well, we usually get one or the other. Like some teams are like overly confident, and some teams that say it's very chaotic. But that's not the highest score we've gotten. We've had people try to go off the scale, but yeah, okay. So an 8, we'll take it. Well, where can people find out more about Altair and Centrifuge and read up on everything going on?
So you can check out the Centrifuge website, centrifuge.io. And for more on Altair, it's just centrifuge.io/Altair. We've also got Twitter and a Medium blog with lots of content and information. But if you want to just jump in and ask us a question or those ambassadors that I mentioned, you can always jump in the Telegram chat, which is centrifuge_chat on Telegram.
Well, awesome. I guess if anybody listening has a better name for the new version of Tin Lake beyond Copper Pond, then they could jump in and maybe offer up their suggestion. Well,
yeah.
Thanks again to our guest Cassidy. It was great learning more about Centrifuge and their Kusama project Altair. So make sure you like, subscribe, and review us on your favorite podcast platform, and we will be sure to bring you along as we get a backstage pass to the world of Parachain auctions. So until next time, I'm Brian Hoffman, and this has been the Parachain Auctions Podcast. This content is not financial or investment advice. All interviews and discussions are opinions only. Kraken does not endorse the accuracy of this content. None of the following information should be construed as a recommendation to support any specific Parachain project or to participate in Parachain auctions in general. See our terms of service for more information.